What's good? It's Wood. Please like the video, subscribe to the channel if you were into the fight talk. We have Saul Canelo Alvarez, 57 wins, 2 losses, and 2 draws, taking on Gennady Golovkin, aka Triple G, 42 wins, 1 loss, and 1 draw. This is obviously the trilogy fight between 2 legendary historic fighters, Saul Canelo Alvarez and Triple G. They fought to a draw the first time. Canelo was awarded a very close split decision win in the rematch. Both decisions were very controversial, very disputed, and Canelo Alvarez, obviously former 154-pound champ, former middleweight champion, former 168-pound undisputed champion, even won a belt up at 175 light heavyweight against a faded crusher, Sergey Kovalev, and then Triple G was pretty much running roughshod over the middleweight division through the 2010s. And this is how historic Triple G's middleweight run was. So from 2008 to 2017, that's like almost 10 years, he scored 23 knockouts in a row. Again, that was 2008, starting with Malik Desira, and then finishing with the decision win over Daniel Jacobs in 2017. Between that, nothing but knockouts. Triple G won his first regular belt in middleweight. In 2010, he became a regular champ, and then he started accumulating more belts, becoming super champ and then unifying other belts and so forth. But he didn't lose those belts. Again, he had gotten his first one in 2010. He didn't lose those belts until that rematch with Canelo in 2018. So we're talking champion from 2010 to 2018. Basically 20 fights later after winning a belt, he finally lost the belts. And, you know, I could go on about both of these guys' careers, but I actually already dropped an early thoughts preview on this fight where I go through much more of their careers as a whole. You could go check out the early thoughts video, and then I did a second early thoughts video basically suggesting what if Triple G wins this trilogy fight. But for this video, I want to speak more specifically to this fight as opposed to doing basically a review of their resumes. And that's because they've already shared the ring for 24 rounds together. Neither guy got knocked down. That's pretty crazy, right? 2 12-round fights, and especially going into the first fight, you know, I thought that Canelo would be up against it, being that it was Triple G that was the dominator of the middleweight division. Canelo still felt like a visitor to the middleweight division. And again, this draw took place in 2017, so this is now 5 years ago against like a 34, 35-year-old Triple G. And going into this trilogy fight, Gennady Golovkin is now 40 years old. But yeah, going into that first fight, Triple G was the guy, as I just read off, who was killing it in the division, and Canelo had only fought a pretty much outsized Miguel Cotto. Miguel Cotto was a 140-pound champion and then had a very good run becoming a champion at 147. Yes, he did do the 154 thing, had success there. Hell, he did win a belt at middleweight, but Miguel Cotto at biggest was a natural 147 guy. And then Canelo fought against Julio Cesar Chavez Jr. as well it was a catch weight, but Chavez is obviously a bigger fighter, but he can't make weight to save his life. So it's hard to really classify that as a true middleweight fight for Canelo. So Canelo wasn't an established middleweight when he entered the ring against Triple G the first time, but he exceeded expectations. You know, I thought Triple G was going to probably stop him. You know, you can't overstate how deadly and dangerous Triple G was fight after fight. Yes, you could argue he was beating mostly, you know, B- to B+ level fighters. Daniel Jacobs, you know, would be the exception. And then Kell Brook was obviously a couple divisions out of his depths fighting Triple G. But Triple G was beating like the Matthew Macklins. David Lemieux was a pretty good win, right? But, you know, you also had Willie Monroe Jr., Marco Antonio Rubio, Martin Murray. Pretty good fighter. Martin Murray, I thought, should have probably gotten either the nod or something close to it against Sergio Martinez. Triple G knocked out Daniel Gill, Curtis Stevens, but he wasn't fighting people who others would classify as A-level opponents. So there is that. But I thought that Canelo exceeded expectations in that first fight against Triple G, even though I thought Triple G should have earned a close but somewhat clear decision win. But it was ruled a draw, which then, you know, begged for its rematch. Very controversial decision in that first one. The rematch was a great fight. I would say it was more action-packed, and it was certainly a different style of fight, because Canelo, who I believe to have been emboldened, having taken Triple G's power over the course of 12 rounds in that first fight, felt emboldened to fight a different style, more so on his front foot, to where it was Triple G that was kind of, keeping things going with the jab and trying to win rounds that way. Very unexpected style of fight that was playing out, made for a very exciting fight. They both had to dig super deep. Canelo was awarded a, again, split decision win, which also didn't sit well with a lot of fight fans. The public is pretty torn on these Canelo versus Triple G decisions, both in the first and in the second fight. But what these fights did for these fighters' careers, trajectory-wise, it launched Canelo, where he would, not only fight Daniel Jacobs and beat him via unanimous decision, go up to 175, beat the Crusher, or formerly the Crusher, reduced version of Sergey Kovalev, took a title at 175 light heavyweight, but then he became undisputed at 168, which was incredible. Meanwhile, Triple G has had a couple big and good wins since. He beat Derevianchenko. He just, unified two of the belts at middleweight against Ryota Murata in a very difficult fight. Go rewatch that one. That's Triple G's latest fight. But those two decisions in those first and second Canelo versus Triple G fights were so consequential, kind of set their careers on different paths, where, Triple G, has had a lot more inactivity than Canelo. And, that goes into the odds going into this trilogy fight, where a lot of people don't think Triple G has a great chance at winning this one. Not only is he 40 years old, but he has been getting hit a lot more. Not only against Sergey Derevianchenko, a fight where many thought that Derevianchenko should have maybe won a close decision, but against Ryota Murata, who, through 4 rounds, that was looking pretty scary for Triple G. Some people will try to argue, oh no, Triple G's more or less, got a lot of the same tools, and he fought Murata and looked pretty much like he's, looked for most of his career. No, I beg to differ. You look at those first 4 rounds, look at how much gas and wind Triple G's sucking when he's going back to his corner after round 3, after round 4, even after round 5. Triple G starts to turn it around a bit more in round 6, ended up stopping Murata in the 9th round. So he did score a knockout victory. But look at the shots that he's getting hit with. Look at Ryota Murata's commitment to the body. I think that surprised a lot of people, especially Triple G. Murata is usually a right-handed headhunter who's got good punching power, doesn't have the sharpness. I mean, he's a sharp puncher, but not as sharp as Canelo Alvarez. But Ryota Murata was actually targeting the body, both with a big left scooping hook to the body, which was landing effectively, pushing Triple G back and making him suck even more wind. But Ryota Murata was also lowering that right hand to the body multiple times to then set up more headshots, where it was bothering Triple G seemingly so much that Triple G was guarding the body, almost accepting the, the headshot with the right hand, which, by the way, Triple G does this little thing where he lowers his forehead into the punch, so the fist runs into Triple G's forehead instead of flush in the face. And also Triple G himself has this left hook where he turns the thumb over and kind of turns it over like that. He's been doing that throughout much of his career. Look at how he knocked out Marco Antonio Rubio. But you would think that Triple G would be breaking his hands on foreheads, because it's almost like he's aiming for the, kind of the crown of the forehead with a lot of those, left hook shots where he kind of missiles it downward and turns it over. But when Ryota Murata was headhunting, well, not headhunting, but changing levels, going first to the body, then going high with the right hand, Triple G would lower his forehead into that right hand. But still, Ryota Murata was extremely competitive in those first 4 to 5 rounds. Again, Triple G turned it around by the 6th, 7th, 8th, and then finished him in the 9th. Meanwhile, Canelo obviously, became undisputed at 168. So those are their diverging paths. Well, and then he lost to Dmitry Bivol, daring to be great at 175, basically trying to capture the WBA belt. Many people thought he was going to then pivot and fight Beterbiev, which, a lot of people at the time not only favored him heavily against Dmitry Bivol, but they would have favored him against Artur Beterbiev. Canelo's stock was that high after he became undisputed at 168, they were looking at Canelo like, damn, is there anybody he cannot beat? You know, so that was a bit of a reality check when Dimitri Bivol handedly beat Canelo via decision. The fight was a lot less competitive than the scorecards would indicate. It was a competitive fight, but Bivol won by a few rounds, not one round. It wasn't 115 to 113, 7 rounds to 5. That was bogus. But yeah, that was a bit of a reality check, kind of brought Canelo's stock back down to earth to where they're kind of maybe looking at Canelo versus Triple G through a new lens. But yeah, let's get into what we should expect between Canelo and Triple G. Triple G is getting hit a lot more flush, and I question whether he's got the legs for basically to fight the same fight that he fought in the rematch against Canelo. And it's certainly, you know, to fight the fight that he fought in the first fight against Canelo, where he was the guy who was doing the hunting as opposed to doing the, you know, continuous jabbing in the rematch. I don't think Triple G has the legs for that anymore at 40 years old. Not only that, but when you get older, your skin even starts to tear and bruise in a different way, to where it's almost like you've got a fresher skin in your late 20s, early 30s, to where the damage doesn't show as much as it does when you're, you know, 40 years old. So I think that there's a possibility that Canelo could cut and bruise up Triple G a lot earlier in this trilogy fight, to where the looks of concern on Triple G are, you know, take place a lot earlier, where you start looking at maybe an eye closing, maybe, you know, skin tearing above the eyes, something like that. Even though we haven't seen Triple G, you know, get beaten up a ton in his career. Yes, those were very difficult fights against Canelo, especially that rematch. Great fight. Please rewatch that rematch. But, you know, also against Derevianchenko and Murata, those were very close calls for Triple G. But if you even go back to that first fight between Canelo and Triple G, where, you know, Triple G was the favorite in not only the first fight, but in the rematch, Triple G was a slight favorite. Think about that. And then think about how the odds have dramatically shifted for this trilogy fight. Well, Canelo, you know, what surprised me about that first Canelo versus Triple G fight is, yes, I thought that Canelo was showing, you know, big phases of inactivity in some of those rounds where Triple G started to take control, in my view, in the middle and late rounds, where he was kind of, you know, walking Canelo down a bit. Canelo looked like he was moving around the ring to kind of buy time to then let nice combinations go in spurts. But Canelo in those first 3 rounds against Triple G, what was eye-opening to me is that in those exchanges, Canelo seemed to be a much crisper puncher, where he was landing the much flashier looking shots, you know, with the uppercut, with the counter right hand, with the, you know, with the jab right hand, left hook combinations. And it looked like Triple G, it looked like his punches were a little bit more labored. Like they were, I mean, that's maybe Triple G's style, but it almost looked like he was more so punching like underwater or something, where it just looked like it was a little slower off the launch pad when he was throwing. So it became very apparent early that Canelo had the faster hands than Triple G. But if we're looking at this trilogy fight, Canelo has like kind of developed a trunk movement. I mean, he's always kind of had nice upper body movement. But in recent fights, especially in his foray in the 168-pound division, the way that which this fight, by the way, is going to be fought at, this is Triple G's debut at 168. Triple G basically spent his whole career at middleweight. Canelo's done a lot more going up the weight classes and then back down, and he's done a lot more weight hopping. Triple G's been a solid middleweight through and through. So this is his 168-pound debut. Canelo's been there, done that at 168. So it's funny that how the dynamics have changed, where, again, going into that first fight, it was Canelo who was seen to be the guy who was a visitor in a higher weight class. But Canelo is a sharper puncher, but he's also a faster defensive upper body, you know, punch avoider, basically. Triple G's head is more or less there. He's not moving his head a ton, but he's jabbing his way through. It's almost like his defense is his pressure jab that's reducing your offensive output, because do you really want to be in punching range for when Triple G lets his non-jab punches go? Well, if you're Canelo, the answer is maybe. If you feel like you could get your punches off faster in the way that even Ryota Murata was in those first 5 rounds against Triple G, then, you know, things could look like they are to your advantage, because you are whipping that right hand quicker and you're landing flush. And so that is one thing that I think is going to bank Canelo some of the early rounds here, is that I just think he's going to look like the crisper puncher, landing the cleaner shots. Now, can Triple G start to, if this does in fact happen, does Triple G then start to even things out in the middle rounds where he wins some of those rounds in rounds like 4 through 7, 8? Well, first of all, if Canelo gets off to like a 2 rounds to none lead, 3 rounds to none lead, Triple G might have a major uphill battle here. And not only that, but 2 of the 3 judges who judged the second fight are going to be judging in this third fight. So whatever you thought should have been scoring Triple G more rounds in that rematch, it might also not score him and land him rounds in this trilogy fight. Just something to think about. But if Canelo gets off to an early lead, which I kind of expect him to, I don't see him to be a slow starter. I see him as being a more patient starter these days. If you've noticed, Canelo is a lot more economical in his energy expenditure, right? So he is not just like jab, 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 move. He's not constantly throwing punches. He's changing levels, looking for good opportunities to make every single punch count. That's almost the type of fighter that Canelo's become. So another thing to think about is, maybe Triple G isn't the same guy who was fighting Canelo in the rematch and was being able to fight just a high-pace, high-speed chess match. Well, I mean, it was a dogfight and a chess match, but basically a very active fight, round over round over round, throughout the course of 12 rounds. Even if Triple G's not able to do that, well, I don't know if Canelo is still able to do that. Yes, the idea is that Canelo has gotten better since his 2 fights with Triple G. That was the reputation, right? It was like Triple G's probably gotten worse. Canelo's gotten better since their rematch, right? Well, he's also become sort of a different fighter. I look at him as throwing fewer punches, but making those punches count. Like, rewatch the way that he fought. Well, he was just walking Callum Smith down from pillar to post, which I think is a win that's going to age really well, especially when you look at what Callum Smith is doing in the 175-pound division now. We'll see how he does going forward, but yeah, I like that win over Callum Smith. Super dominant. But if you look at the way that he was hunting Billy Joe Saunders, he wasn't trying to, out tit for tat Billy Joe, who's a very slick southpaw, very elusive, difficult fighter to get a beat on. Canelo was more so, again, making every single one of those splashing, hard power punches count. So maybe we do get a more patient first few rounds between Canelo and Triple G, as opposed to Canelo just coming like a bat out of hell like he did in the rematch and look like he's trying to go for the stoppage in the first half of the fight against Triple G. But also, since Canelo just lost the fight against Dimitri Bivol, I kind of feel like there is hell to pay. Like, someone's going to have to foot that bill. And unfortunately, it looks like it might be Triple G, right? Where Canelo's pretty pissed off, super motivated going into this trilogy fight. And he also saw his name drop off of a lot of people's, the top of people's pound for pound list. And Canelo's been vocal about this. He looked at that and said, what? Like, he looks at it like, I was taking chances. I was fighting the types of fights that nobody else is fighting, and I lose a decision to Dimitri Bivol, and you guys are going to penalize me on the pound-for-pound list and knock me off the top of it? Okay. So I kind of see that as being Canelo's energy coming into this trilogy fight with Triple G, which, again, might be bad news for Triple G. Can Triple G tire Canelo in the way that it looked like he was in the first fight against Canelo? So if Canelo is truly a more economical, puncher, where he's conserving more of his energy and he can't just stay on a treadmill and just basically, just stay on a high-speed style fight, which, I don't know, you watch that Caleb Plant fight and it wasn't Canelo tiring against Caleb Plant and getting broken down, right? But can Triple G push the pace with his jab and power punching pressure style against Canelo in this trilogy fight in the way that he did in the middle rounds against Ryota Murata and start potentially breaking Canelo down? It seems unlikely, right? Given where they are age-wise and given how hittable Triple G seems at this stage of his career. And by the way, body shots, I mean, Triple G also throws body shots of his own, but Canelo is probably going to punish the hell out of Triple G's body. Like, Canelo's a smart dude. He's a student of the game. He watches film, I'm sure. Like, he does his homework. His whole camp does, right? So I'd imagine that Canelo knows that the jig is up when it comes to Triple G's body, just, based on the evidence that we have from the Triple G versus Murata fight. So Canelo's probably thinking if Murata was able to have that type of success in the first 4 or 5 rounds and start beating up on Triple G like that, imagine what I could do with my hand speed, my combinations, my precision punching. I mean, super accurate puncher. Punch for punch, the few fighters in the sport, if any, have the types of lasers that Canelo does. It's a very short list of guys who could punch like that with the accuracy plus the speed and the power. So I'm expecting Canelo to be absolute hell on Triple G's body. And I don't know how Triple G's going to handle that. Like, he worked through it against Murata, and I'm sure he's going to work through it to a degree against Canelo. I just don't know if he's got 36 minutes of that, of the best of Canelo is still in him to be able to persevere and persist through that. Look, the narrative on this fight and the questions being asked, unless you're like, I think Chad Dawson said he thinks Triple G is going to win, and very few people are going Triple G on this one. The conversation is more so, is Canelo going to stop Triple G, or is he going to beat him by decision? Which, shoot, I don't know. Just as a fight fan, I don't know if I'm prepared to see Triple G getting stopped. I don't know how I would feel about that, how I would be able to handle that as a fight fan. Like, Triple G, he's just been so, historic. Even if people don't think he's fought like enough of the great fights that mattered and had enough signature wins throughout his career, he has had a historic and legendary career, nonetheless. Yes, you could argue he didn't get the full juice out of the squeeze just in terms of, never fighting like Billy Joe Saunders at middleweight, Kid Chocolate Peter Quillen at middleweight, Dmitry Pirog earlier in his career. There are different guys who you would have probably wanted to see him fight. Well, he's had a historic career, and to see him basically, go out, even if it's on his shield, that would just be one of those, like, dams, And it would be different than, like, when Roy Jones got upset by Antonio Tarver in the rematch, where it was just one punch, and all of a sudden, the untouchable, invincible Roy Jones Jr. is on the canvas in that Jones versus Tarver rematch, right? This would be a bit different because we know we've got a 40-year-old going into this fight, and Roy Jones was much younger when he got stopped by Tarver, but we've got a 40-year-old Triple G, and most people think that Triple G's probably going to get stopped late. I tend to believe it's tough because there is also, you got a couple of the body shots, you got a couple like the possibility of injury or skin tearing. Because look, Triple G is more likely to throw out a shoulder these days than he was in his prime. There are just a lot of things that could go wrong with a 40-year-old in the ring. So the idea of him, look, I think it would take every bit of Triple G's ability, his heart, his desire, his guts, all of that, and his skill, his boxing IQ, all of it, to go 12 rounds. But I think that he does it. I'm gonna give him that in this one. Yes, I think that it's very possible that Canelo gets the stoppage here, and it could happen in a multitude of ways. I don't think it happens early. If Canelo comes in here and blows Triple G out, I think everybody's jaw will drop and they'll be like, damn. And then obviously the narrative will switch to, well, maybe Triple G was just old. There's always somebody who's taking some credit away when somebody accomplishes something significant and big. But if he just blows Triple G out, I think we'd be pretty damn surprised. I think that it's just much more likely that Canelo wins a couple of the early rounds. Triple G starts having his moments in the middle rounds where, it starts to look like, damn, can Triple G, make this a very competitive fight? Can he beat Canelo as Triple G starts winning a couple rounds, like the 4th round, 6th round, something like that, right? Starts winning multiple rounds and, starts looking good, like he's catching his second wind. But I feel like even 40-year-olds' second wins come, with a quicker expiration time, where I think that then, if Canelo sticks to his guns and still fights in a Canelo, style where he's still jabbing, looking for his counter right hand opportunities, whether it's the pull counter, like, I just think that, when the bullets are flying in these exchanges, I think that once again, Triple G's punches are going to look a little bit more labored, and he's going to be landing. And even when he's throwing those like slightly slower punches, they still break the fighters the hell down. Just look at Murati. Like, again, he was having success in the 4th and 5th rounds, but he was also getting hit during those rounds too. And that accumulated punishment, where it doesn't take a ton of accumulation when the punches are coming from Triple G, it's just beating you up and breaking you down, period. Triple G is just one of the most destructive forces of the era or past era. Triple G's got all-time level power, and that isn't going to change. And he also does still have a pummeling jab. So I think he will be effective against Canelo. Maybe through 7 rounds, it could be, what we see, how the judges end up scoring it, might be entirely different things. Like, we might think that, Triple G's down 4 rounds to 3, or might be up 4 rounds to 3, and then we come to find out that the judges had it at that time, Canelo, by like 5 rounds to 2 or something like that. But I think Triple G will make a run of it in the middle rounds, will make things interesting, but I do think that he will start getting hurt, probably to the body, but I think it's gonna be a mix. He's gonna get hit up top as well, and obviously the beatings to the body are gonna open up our opportunities to go up top. And I'm just saying, if Canelo is able to break Billy Joe Saunders' orbital bone, what's he gonna do to a 40-year-old Triple G in the later rounds as Triple G starts to fatigue? And if Canelo still has a lot of energy in him going into, say, the 8th or 9th round, it's almost hard to say that Canelo doesn't stop Triple G late, but something about, Triple G's like fortitude and just his pride. I mean, there's a lot of pride. This is a grudge match as much as anything too, right? I think Triple G is going to find a way to go the distance against Canelo Alvarez, and Canelo Alvarez is going to win, not via split or majority decision, nothing like that. I think that this is actually going to be a unanimous decision win for Canelo Alvarez. So this one is going to be, I think, in terms of the scorecards, less controversial than the rematch, and obviously than the first fight. Like, I think that the first fight was more controversial. The draw was more controversial than the rematch. The rematch, I really do feel could have gone either way, and I feel like more onlookers also agree that that one could have more so gone either way, the rematch. And if I said, by the way, that the rematch was a split decision win for Canelo, no, it was a majority decision win for Canelo, but the first fight was a split draw. So I think that this third fight, the trilogy fight, is going to result in a unanimous decision win for Canelo. Something like, I think maybe we see a 8 rounds to 4 type of fight, but I think that the judges might have it something closer to like 9-3, something like that. Will we see a knockdown in this fight? Possibly, but I feel like if we see a knockdown, especially if it's Canelo knocking Triple G down, then we're almost likely to get a stoppage. Like, Canelo's got a way of going for the kill if he, senses blood in the water. But man, if Triple G finds a way to pull this one off, this will be one of those all-time level wins. Like, not only because he's 40, but because of what the first 2 fights and those resulting decisions did for both careers. For him to come back and vindicate all that with the win in the trilogy fight, you might just want to ride off into the sunset. Like, that would be tremendous accomplishment-wise for Triple G. That would just, he's already probably a first ballot Hall of Famer and all that, but that would basically put him up with the all-timers if he's able to pull that off. But yeah, I'm going Canelo Alvarez, this time via unanimous decision. I do think Triple G is going to dig deep and survive the fight, even if it gets really rough and difficult, and it looks like he might be on the verge of getting stopped. I just can't discount the pride, even though, man, it's hard to... The 40-year-old legs and the gas tank, the vulnerability to the body, there are just a lot of reasons to think that Canelo can get the stoppage. But I'm going Canelo, but via unanimous decision in this one. But please let me know what you think about this trilogy fight. And if you haven't, by the way, seen my early thoughts videos, again, I do more of a look on these guys' resume and just kind of talk about their careers and talk about the significance of their first 2 fights against each other. Again, I've got 2 related Canelo versus Triple G 3 previews. Again, the first one is early thoughts, and then the other one is what if Triple G wins. But Please let me know what you think about this fight in the comments. This is a truly historic occasion. I'm glad that Triple G has this, opportunity to avenge the first 2 losses. I just think that unfortunately for him, not only was he granted 2, unfortunate for him, once again, decisions in those first 2 fights, but now when he gets the trilogy fight, he's 40 years old, and, with every passing year, even in the likelihood that Canelo was going to beat Triple G in the rematch versus in the first fight, the more time was ticking, the better things looked for Canelo Alvarez in terms of, the likelihood that he would be victorious. So I think that that's even more so the case, obviously, in this trilogy fight. But yeah, who knows? This is boxing, and we've seen some pretty wild things. But please let me know your thoughts in the comments, and like the video, subscribe to the channel if you are into the Fight Talk. I'm Woog. Thanks for tuning in.